Okay, so at the risk of boring those of you who were around yesterday, I thought I should start just very briefly by explaining what I do. I don't write reports, I'm a journalist, so I write articles, but the nature of the articles means that they do take a long time to put together, so there's somewhat of a hybrid between what perhaps journalists and academics do. And again, with apologies to those for whom this is a repetition, but I just will briefly tell you how I set up Lawyers for Better Business and why, because it has a bearing on how tax justice has come into the frame for me. So I was freelancing for a long time after having worked in a lot of financial publications, including the Financial Times. And about a decade ago, as part of that freelance work, I started writing articles for International Bar Association magazines. And one of the topics I covered for them was business and human rights. I became increasingly interested in this and also interested in what it meant for lawyers. I was interested in the lawyers who advised multinational corporations and how they were advising them, mostly because no other journalists were paying much attention to this. So I decided then that I would try and write about it, but I found that there were very few media outlets who wanted to take this information from me, apart from the International Bar Association. So I then had to set up my own network. And what I wanted to do was set up a website, but not just to provide information. I also wanted to set up a network of lawyers in as many countries as possible who were interested in this agenda and who wanted to see how they could help change the advice that they gave. The reason for trying to do it globally, as ambitious as that is that in different parts of the world and in different regions, people have different priorities. And for me, it was very important for them to be able to tell me what they were doing so that I could relay that and so that people could effectively find each other and learn from their experience. That network took me a year to set up before I actually launched the website. And the way I did it was to find academics and lawyers and experts all over the world, mostly actually through people I'd interviewed, interestingly enough, but they then passed me on to people in their network, and my editorial advisory board came out of that process. If you're interested, you can find out who those people are on my website. So once I'd set up the network, I decided then that I needed to find topics that would be of interest that other people weren't looking at. And the first one actually that came up, interestingly enough, was fiduciary duty and the intergenerational obligations there, which lawyers don't pay very much attention to. But pretty soon I started to think about why lawyers were not focusing on the impact of the tax policies that multinationals are engaging in. And then I realised that one of the reasons was that very few lawyers were paying much attention to the idea that they could perhaps give different kinds of tax advice from the advice they were giving. So I started on a journey looking at that and went to an international tax conference where I met John Christensen, other people from TJ and various NGOs, and found that they too were looking at the lawyers who wanted to take a different angle. The trouble was that very few lawyers actually wanted to talk about this, certainly not on record and being quoted. So I had to think, what do you do to persuade them to change that? I had to sit on it for quite a while. It really was very, very difficult to find any lawyers willing to talk about this until I got wind of the work that the International Bar Association Human Rights Institute was doing, and through that I got in touch with Lloyd at the stage where he was still working on the report, but very kindly agreed to share some of the work that he was doing with me. I also got introduced to David, sitting here, and between those two, they helped me to find a new way of looking at this agenda and talking in terms of tax abuse. which of course was a game changer in terms of what we could then say that lawyers need to do about this. I actually published the article on my website at the end of 2012, at which time Tax Justice Network produced a blog for them as well. The Starbucks issue came to the fore, which in terms of timing, as I say, it's every journalist's dream to have a news agenda which amplifies your story, and that one was there. I'll just give you a couple of things that I said in that article, because I was looking at it just yesterday, and the thing that struck me about it was, even though it was written at the end of 2012, there's still a lot to be done, because quite frankly, not a lot has moved on. But here are just some of the quotes that I got from people. The first one was from a lawyer who said, "Tax avoidance is something that is advocated and taught during legal training. I think that campaigners may have more success advocating tax justice to policymakers than to commercial lawyers who are employed to carry out a particular job. Naming and shaming can be a very powerful tool." And then another one said, oh, sorry, this was a corporate citizenship report. And I think this actually sort of vindicates the idea of tax abuse rather than other terms. This was a survey that found that the traditional defence of compliance is dead. The distinction between evasion, which is illegal, and avoidance, which is lawful, has dissolved in the eyes of governments, NGOs, and citizens. So again, I think that's a really powerful thing to bear in mind. And then, of course, this idea of tax abuse being a term where you can get around the legal minefield that it's otherwise very easy to get bogged down in. And I'm sure that there'll be a lot more discussion on that. And the other thing which I think is very important, which certainly a lot of journalists don't pay attention to, is what activists are doing. As Alison said, it's a very good gauge of what's going on out there in the real world. And at the time when I was doing this article, UK Uncut were taking Goldman Sachs to a legal challenge in the UK courts. So I talked to Tim Street, who was the director of UK Uncut Legal Action. They actually set up a special organisation for this legal action. And he said to me that the reason that they were bringing the case was because it showed the deep level of outrage that people feel over state-sanctioned tax dodging by big business, while government destroys public services that ordinary people rely on, saying there is no money. So, of course, that was just the beginning, rather than the end. And I have to tell you that I didn't expect what followed for me, certainly, and for my website, once I'd written a report. But because really what I'm trying to do as well with my work is see where these things can turn into action rather than just discussion. It was very important to me once I realised the enormity of what I'd started to look into, that something could be done to take some action. And this is where my network started to come to play. I got in touch with the board member that I have at the University of Johannesburg, David Bilchitz, is a law professor there. He also runs the Human Rights Institute, and I also knew that he put on conferences. So I suggested to him at the beginning of 2013 that we put on a conference in Johannesburg to invite people from throughout sub-Saharan Africa to come and talk about the implications of tax and human rights for the continent. And we decided to time it for when the International Bar Association report came out, which was October 2013, so that again we could amplify that work and bring it into the discussion. Now, Alison will know that you think about this and then actually doing it. You really do need a lot of time and effort and a lot of collaboration from a lot of people. But we managed it, and why it took me so long actually to bring it together was that I insisted that we got as many different voices there as possible. So we got businesses, we got lawyers, we got accountants, we got NGOs, we got government people, we got tax collectors. We had an amazing group of people, a lot of whom had never sat in the same room before, to talk about these things. And the outcome is they've all gone off and are still talking about them and deciding what they can do to take some of this agenda forward. The next step was to take this to the United Nations Business and Human Rights Forum in December. The idea being that we could then tell other people what we'd done in South Africa, so that if they wanted to do something similar in another part of the world, we could help them to do it. And again, we're waiting to see some of the outcomes of that, but I've had approaches from people in Latin America, continental Europe and elsewhere, and I need as much help as possible to get all this off the ground. So that's just some of the outcomes that have happened, just as a result really of starting off on looking at that. This was the picture that we used for the South African conference, and just to tell you, it's very important to me because what it is it's the school in the area of Zambia where Zambia Sugar operates. And Zambia Sugar was part of a report done by Action Aid, which some of you probably know about the implications of tax abuse on the people of Zambia. And as you can see, this is a classroom, and the resources are negligible. And to me, it just speaks volumes about why we actually need some action on all of this. So, as other things I've been doing since then, Tax Justice Network has asked me to work with them, and it's a great privilege to be helping them and supporting their work on tax and human rights. And most recently, I've started to think about institutional investors and the role that they can play. Again, I think this is an overlooked area because people could do an awful lot if they thought about what their pension funds are being invested in, but institutional investors could be a fantastic lever to start to change corporate behaviour on tax. So I have started to collaborate with an organisation called Responsible Investor who produce information for this community. And last month they held their European annual conference at which they invited me to moderate a panel to speak to responsible investors about why tax justice is a potential risk for corporations they invest in. And again, that's only just starting, but I can see that there is another huge strand of work that if anyone's interested in it, I think there's plenty to do. So really, I think just to finish, I want to say the main reason that I set up Lawyers for Her Business was to not just talk to lawyers about what needs doing and what's coming down the track that they should know about, but also to think very hard about who they need to collaborate with and where they need to collaborate to get leverage to make things work. My experience is that whether it's lawyers or any of the other people, accountants, investors, governments, even some NGOs, quite frankly, when you talk about tax and human rights, a lot of them are still at the stage of saying, what's this got to do with me? So I think there's plenty still to do, and I think we all need to persuade them to join the debate. So thank you very much indeed.